Welcome to episode 92 of Elves, Rings, and Nerdy Things. We are continuing this relative shit show, which is Rings of Power. And we are on
Yay!
episode 2 of season 3. So let's not beat around the bush. No time for pleasantries.
Actually,
Let's get straight into it. Oh, you do have a pleasantry?
well, I should say, so longtime listeners of the show will know that we are, Sean and I, in addition to being fantasy nerds, if we can take on that mantle, are also football fans. And our rooting interests are the Detroit Lions, which is probably, that's your number one rooting interest, right, Sean? And I'd say my number one rooting interest is the University of Michigan Wolverines. And can I just say, live on air, or, not live, but for all posterity, my fandoms totally suck right now. The the Rings of Power is not good, and we'll talk about the specifics. House of the Dragon ended on kind of a bad note, and then George R. R. Martin shat out rather all over House of the Dragon, like to the extent that he posted something on his blog and then deleted the post because it was probably causing too much negative backlash. I haven't even dipped a toe in there. And then after a up and down first game of the season, my Michigan Wolverines gave an absolute terrible showing this past weekend, getting pantsed at home by Texas in a really bad way, and in a way that like really does not bode well for the rest of the season. So things aren't great. I really need Critical Role season 3 to be good, or this fall is just going to be a lot of watching things on the television and getting not happy about it. With one exception, which is the Detroit Lions.
Yeah. I mean, we know Critical Role is going to be good, so wait until October and then you'll have that reprieve for fantasy material. But at least, yeah, my Detroit Lions. I'm a big University of Michigan fan, but I didn't go there, so I don't have like this heartfelt connection to like Ann Arbor and the campus. I just like the team. But yeah, Detroit Lions are my number one. They're my boo.
Anyway, football stuff aside, because we know that our core audience doesn't like the football conversation.
Yeah, let's talk about the shitty Rings of Power.
Let's talk about
Read
Rings
it.
of Power.
Read us the recap.
All
Recap,
right.
Sam.
This is episode 2 of season 2. The ongoing eruption of Mount Doom causes an earthquake in the dwarven realm Khazad-dûm that destroys their infrastructure and leads to the withering of their crops. King Durin III and his son, Prince Durin IV, refuse to reconcile despite the crisis. Galadriel has a vision of Celebrimbor's death and asks to go to Eregion. Gil-galad agrees if Elrond leads her company, and Círdan convinces the reluctant Elrond that it would be better for him to guide his friends rather than abandon them. In Rune, a dark wizard sends a group of riders to capture the stranger. Finding a staff that he recognizes from his dreams, the stranger summons a sandstorm which drives the riders off. He loses control and the storm sweeps Nori and Poppy away. Sauron poses as Halbrand at the gates of Eregion and refuses to leave. Though he promised Galadriel he would never talk to Halbrand again, Celebrimbor does not know he is Sauron and eventually approaches him. Halbrand convinces Celebrimbor that he is Anatar, the Lord of Gifts, an emissary from the Valar who has come to help make rings of power for dwarves and men. Sean, what did you think of episode 2?
Too many plot lines.
And we still have no Numenor yet.
And yeah, the Numenor isn't even included in this. For me, the big thing was when I was watching this episode, there were so many things about the dwarves that I forgot had happened.
Mm-hmm.
And then you still have the cliffhanger of the Balrog.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They should have uncovered by now. You would imagine.
There was. We haven't seen the Balrog at all in the season so far. We know in the previews or in the trailer we see a Balrog.
Something happens with the Balrog. And then, like you said, Numenor. Like we don't even have any of the plot lines of Numenor yet. And the show just feels like it's stretched too thin. Like not enough butter scraped over too much bread, one might say.
Hey, are you stealing lines from
yes,
the
I am.
well-loved movie The Lord of the Rings?
We'll get to that in a minute. But it honestly just feels too jumbled. And if this show would have been at least focused in on, like we said, and how Sam would have done the show, how Sean would have done the show, really focusing in on the relationship between the elves and Mordor and Sauron coming back and the forging of the rings and all of that, I think it would be a much more manageable show.
Hmm.
But when you have Numenor, you have the Southlands, now you have Isildur, who's separated from Numenor, so he has his own plot lines going on now. You have Numenor itself and Queen Muriel and everything that's going on there.
You have the stranger, and you
The
have
stranger and the Horfoots and
and the adversaries of the stranger who get their own screen time and their own scenes.
the Dark Wizard now. And like there's just so much happening. And it gets really frustrating when there's a plot line that is super interesting and I want to see more of. And then that only gets like 5 minutes of screen time in this episode.
Which
And
plot
then
line is that?
I'm it's a hypothetical plot
Oh,
line.
okay.
Yeah.
So there isn't
I
a
don't
plot
even
line
have like a,
that's that interesting to you.
if I have to think about it, I can come up with an answer. But because I get that feeling like when I'm watching the show and I'm like, oh, this is great. I love where this is going. And then I
Isn't
don't get that. I like they don't have a continuation of that subplot for like an episode and a half. And I'm like, okay, now you're giving me shit that I don't care about. And I don't want to watch this right now.
yeah, this show is blue balls.
Yeah.
It is constantly leading you on. I sent you a text after I finished watching episode 2 the first time, and I should say a disclaimer, I have not watched it a second, so I recognize that some of my reactions, my criticisms might be somewhat surface level, but I had a positive impression coming out of this episode. And when you kind of before we started recording, you challenged me on that a little bit, and I have to admit a lot of it was because of just some of the visuals and some of the climactic scenes, but those only last so long, right? The positive impression that those give you only lasts so long because it is, yes, like you're saying, not enough time is spent developing a really strong, good core story or two, one or two plot lines, and then so many of the other things just don't make sense or come out of nowhere or um even in a fantasy setting, kind of beggar belief. And I say that specifically because I have an issue with the whole earthquake thing, which we can get to if
Mhm.
in a second. But yeah, it is frustrating that they can achieve really cool visuals, really cool scenes, but they're so hollow. And then the individual scenes themselves are disconnected in a lot of ways, right? Like you have, I think, really cool visuals in the Rune plot line with that dark wizard and the magic stuff happening there. That's interesting. But we get all of 5 minutes with it, and people are acting stupid and weird, and we have no idea who's who and what's what and what the point is. And I mean, I've got some additional Harfoot. I have issues with the entire Rune plot line. As cool as it can look, but then everything else just bubbles up with everything from the stupid accents of the Harfoots to the okay, we've seen it. Yeah, we get it. The stranger has a hard time managing his power. Like you beat me over the head with that. Can we move this forward, please?
And the stranger having issues with his magic. He knows he needs like some form of tool to control it. But why would just a random ass tree have what you need to like control the magic? You know what I mean? It just doesn't
Hmm.
make any sense. Like trying to find a staff, like a particular staff.
Yeah,
I,
they've and you've watched episodes 3 and 4, right?
Mhm.
So if it's a spoiler, feel free because I think this is a relatively minor point. Have they explained at all how staffs work and how they're made and the importance of them? Like, have we set that up? Have they set that
Nope.
up at least? No. Okay. So it's like it's one of those things where,
Just that he needs to find a staff.
yeah, okay. Like this here, you could have a line with the Dark Wizard being like, "We need to get him before he understands how to focus his power." Something, just a little hint at the stakes, because that's the other point with, and
They they
we
They do say that in this episode.
We need to get him
The
before he can figure out. Yeah, they do. They do. You're
Yeah,
right.
the
You're right.
Dark
Okay.
Wizard
Okay.
says that.
Okay.
But the problem is you get a little bit more clarification in episode 4 about
Okay.
the stranger, the importance of a staff, all of those things. And therein lies the problem again, though. It's just so poorly written that you're like, it gets so frustrating.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll quick say my one comment about stealing lines from Lord of the Rings that happened with the "we're going in circles" line, but then
Yeah.
it happens again in this episode where Gilgalad says something like, Galadriel goes, "It's giving me visions of the unseen world," and then he goes, "So you mean to tell me it's showing you things that have not yet come to pass?" And it's like, dude, that is exactly from Galadriel in Lord of the Rings. Quit stealing shit that you may mean it to be fan service, but there's such a thing as negative fan service, where and we said this about season 1, where you're trying to get the diehard fans on your side by saying things like this and using things like this. But the diehard fans are really pissed off at the show, and when you use things from Lord of the Rings, that's not going to endear fans to you. It's only going to make them more mad. So when Gilgalad said that, I didn't have this, oh yeah, cool line. It was so cringy for me that it just felt weird and awkward and out of place
Well,
and really shoehorned and forced.
yeah. Again, you set up because she says something like it's giving me a glimpse into the unseen world, right?
Yeah.
And then he responds with, are you seeing things that have yet come to pass?" Though that doesn't make sense from like a logical standpoint, because the unseen world is the Wraith world. Like when Frodo puts the ring on the top of Weathertop and he can see the ring wraiths in their ethereal wraith form. And when later he's fading because of the wound, he can see Glorfindel in his like full glory as a high elf, right? That is the unseen world. The like the foresight, I think it's heavily implied to be like something that Galadriel has. It's like a manifestation of her wisdom. And it's also with Elrond, especially in the books, or excuse me, especially in the movies, where it's something that is like associated with the high elven wisdom that the rings amplify, right? To say I'm getting visions of the unseen world and then say, oh, well, it sounds like you're getting premonitions. Those are two different powers of the ring. And it would have made more sense for Galadriel to say the line, I'm seeing things that may yet come to pass. Because then at least the same character says it. And like that's her conception of this power, right? But still, yes, they're stealing lines from a superior movie, a superior story that again don't make sense, just like they were going in circles, didn't make sense in the context of what those characters were doing. And if this continues, like it is just a constant reminder that show is not as good as the movies. And yeah, it's negative fan service. And I don't know, does it happen more in episodes 3 and 4? You've watched
Not
ahead.
not
No?
as blatantly, that
Okay.
not that I recall. It doesn't happen in 4. Uh you do get a This is kind of a spoiler. You do get a character who makes his debut in episode 4 that uses lines from books, but it makes sense in this case.
Okay. Now you
Hopefully
want,
that was enough of a tease.
yeah, is it Saruman?
No.
No. Damn. Oh, it's Tom Bombadil.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah. So
that
Bombadil's in episode 4, and they directly pull lines from the first book of the Fellowship. And I mean, it makes sense because we've never seen Tom Bombadil on
yeah,
screen
it's
before.
only the yeah. What
Yeah.
are they gonna do? Yeah, what are they
So
gonna do?
then using lines from the source material for him to say, it made complete sense, and I wasn't bothered by it at all. But when you have characters repeating lines that other characters say in a different property, it just is too problematic and pisses me off. What's the next thing we want to talk about, Sam?
Well, sticking with I guess we mentioned the Dark Wizard and we mentioned the rune stuff. So we meet this Dark Wizard for the first time in episode 2. There's no name associated with him, and I think even the subtitles or the closed captioning just describes him as Dark
Dark
Wizard.
Wizard.
So we don't know who he is, and you wanted to speculate.
Yeah, I hope he is one of the two blue wizards. And I
Yes.
know there were a lot of issues I see on the internet. People are saying like, "Oh, he's probably Saruman." I'm like, get the fuck
No,
out of here with that.
no, you're totally wrong. Yeah.
If Saruman was evil all this time ago, there's no way he would be leading the White Council by the time of The Hobbit. It doesn't make
Yeah.
any sense.
Especially if he was an antagonist of who we think is Gandalf,
Yeah.
right? At this point.
No,
Yeah.
I think and I hope that this dark wizard is one of the two blue wizards and our stranger is the second blue wizard. That is what
Oh.
I personally hope. Uh, I think everything with the stranger being Gandalf is all misdirection at this point, being with the Harfoots or halflings, the lines he steals from Lord of the Rings, things that
Follow,
Gandalf has said.
follow your
Follow
nose.
your nose. A third example of just bullshit line stealing. I think all of that is mixed misdirection, and for me, I hope it is Gen or Blue Wizard because we don't know anything about Blue Wizards besides they go east and they don't play a part in the stories of Lord of the Rings. So, and I saw a couple people on different online forums saying, "Oh, but the Blue Wizards were never evil."
That's
We don't know that because
yeah, that
Tolkien didn't like write any of their stories.
I think, and the material that we do have from his notes that were published by Christopher Tolkien and others, like he went back and forth
Yeah,
about it. Like I think at one point he was like, "Oh, they turned to evil or they were lost," and then another time it was like, "Oh no, it was only through their work in the East that Sauron's power was like didn't reach the heights that it could have." So either way, like it's a blank slate. Nobody
yeah.
knows who these people are, which
So I
I love that. If we get a bad dark wizard or a bad blue wizard and a good blue wizard, that's fine.
yeah, and I hope the story would be great if like our stranger ends up having to sacrifice himself to take out the other blue wizard
Hmm.
to then prevent Sauron from gaining as much power. Like
Yeah.
that would be amazing. But that's where I'm at. I think blue wizard for sure. And there's some dumb ideas people have, like the dark wizard is the witch king of Angmar. I saw that and I was like,
Yeah. I mean,
so stupid.
I wouldn't put it past them, right? I think I saw something similar. I haven't read any of these articles. I've just seen the headlines as suggested reads. Yeah, that's dumb, especially because if he is a powerful wizard, we don't have any examples of powerful magic users in this world who are not themselves a Maya
Mm-hmm.
or are not heavily influenced by a Maya, like given their power directly, a la the Witch King getting a ring from Sauron and becoming a great sorcerer. So yeah, that would be dumb. I mean there's got to be some sort of tie into Sauron, right? With this group because aren't don't those people have the masked riders? Don't they have like an eye emblem
I think they
on
have the sigil of Adar,
which is the
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 half circle
Mordor?
with the line going through it. Yeah. Which is, I guess, also the symbol of Sauron. But
Yeah, that was yeah, that's what he like carved into Finrod's body, right?
yeah,
I mean, the thing is, that you can't get a clear glimpse of it because all those shots through episode 2, nothing is clear because those shots were all at night or they weren't they weren't
yeah.
shown during the
But
daytime scenes.
what we gather is that it's the cult of Sauron, and you really don't know who this guy is. I'm leaning towards Blue Wizard personally.
Yeah, I like that. I hope it's the case. My issues with the rune stuff is quite literally where are they going?
They're trying
Um,
to find the stars, man. That's it. They just keep going east until they find the stars.
yeah, but they've seen the stars, right? Like,
Yeah, they just keep going in that direction, man.
yeah, but it's
For what purpose? I don't. They
I,
don't know. They're just
yeah,
going in that direction
I,
because
I
something's telling the stranger he's got to go there. So he's going there.
I just don't like it. It's just so hackneyed. And then another headline that I saw, but did not click on was again like raising up the Harfoot accent issue of like, why do these Harfoots have such strong Irish accents? They could have done away with it because at this point it is a little distracting. It's like interfere. I think it, you know me. I have a hard time understanding anybody who doesn't speak American English, apparently. Looking at you, the guy.
Okay,
Andor,
what is
Cassian
this in
Andor. Remember,
reference to?
I was complaining about Cassian Andor's accent. Uh,
Oh, that's right. And
yeah,
that was just like a Spanish
that's
accent.
just him being Spanish. Yeah, but the
Hey,
Harfoots,
you racist.
I was baiting you into saying that. I'm a race baiter, a racist baiter. I don't know. The Harfoots are hard to understand still, and I don't like anything about their stupid the way that they're represented. I think I would prefer it if the stranger were like by himself at this point, and it was just him. I don't think he needs anybody to play off of. It's trite. Anyway, yeah. Hopefully Rune gets cool, but right now it's just kind of annoying. Also, these whole like masked riders things are giving me really strong Knights of Ren vibes,
Hmm.
right? Where they're menacing and they're gonna give the wizard a hard time, and then he throws them around with a tornado out of nowhere and they end up being completely pointless and weak. Maybe I'll be proved wrong in episodes 3 and 4. I fucking doubt that they have the balls to kill off either Poppy or Nori, although again, I'd be happy to be proved wrong there. I did have an issue with the execution of that scene where they attack them at the well, where they establish that they're going to threaten the two Harfoots in order to get the stranger to comply or to like come with them to see the Dark Wizard. And then they just start attacking them and they're shooting arrows at them and they're throwing axes and spears at them. And there's never any announcement of you come with us or we'll do something. They just start attacking. I didn't
Yeah,
like that.
that's a valid point.
Okay.
No qualms here.
Do you want to talk about the Sauron reveal or the Anatar reveal in Eregion?
Yes, I loved it.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was one of the most well written scenes and one of the most visually captivating scenes.
Mm-hmm.
I do have an issue that we'll talk about when we cover episode 4.
Okay.
There's no answer as to why the messengers from episode 1 who were carrying the notes to Celebrimbor that said Halbrand is Sauron. There's no hint as of yet in episode 2 as to why those messages either have or haven't gotten to
Oh,
Celebrimbor.
we see them dead and then the bodies being dragged.
In episode 2?
Yeah, at the end, like at some point in episode 2, we see I think two messengers being dragged through the woods, very obviously dead, and like the horse is dead in the background.
Oh, I don't remember that.
Yeah, but we have no idea who did it or when. Like I think the issue with me and the Areki and Linden stuff is the timing because things are moving very quickly in Linden and they look like they're moving very quickly in Eregion, but we have time and space issues there.
Yeah. But the scene with the reveal of Anatar, Lord of Gifts, is, I think, phenomenal. When
Mm-hmm.
he comes out of the flames, well, first, the conversation between Halbrand and Celebrimbor is great.
Yep.
But then when you have that reveal where Celebrimbor goes to get that first age wine, which is a pretty cool reference. I kind of liked that.
To the Bilbo, like, oh, this wine was laid down by my grandfather or whatever.
Well, I don't even think it's a reference to that, but it's
Oh,
just
okay.
showing how old Celebrimbor is, where he's like, I've got this fancy wine from the first age that I've just been hanging on to. It's time to bust that out. And then when he turns around and doesn't see Halbrand, and then his appearance from the forge
Yeah, that was cool.
is so cool. And then you see almost like the lights of Valinor behind
Mm-hmm.
him,
Mm-hmm.
which were very reminiscent of the visuals that Galadriel had before she jumped off the boat.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought that was cool. And then just like that true deception for Celebrimbor, like Sauron goes full into I am a Valar or a herald of the Valar. And it would make sense as to why Celebrimbor would buy into this. And
I,
he feeds into that messaging of Halbrand isn't who he says he is.
mm-hmm. Which I wonder if they knew that this is how they were going to do it in when they were doing season one. If this is how they were if they already knew this is what the reveal is going to look like. These are the dynamics because it worked. I think
Mhm.
it worked in explaining how Brand achieved the sense of like vulnerability that he
Mhm.
needed to. It's like, oh, I didn't know how to do this, but I need to reveal myself now. That worked for me. I just wonder if did they stumble into that or is that the plan all along? Because it
I don't know
for
if we'll ever know the answer to that.
yeah.
And there's still other things about the reveal that bother me.
Mm-hmm.
Like you said, with the timing of everything, it just feels so rushed.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't make sense that I feel like more time would have to pass
Mm-hmm.
between Gil-galad and Galadriel sending messages to Celebrimbor and him not responding. The distance of travel between Lindon and Eregion is much shorter than the distance of travel from to Mordor and back from Mordor to Eregion. So I don't know. It's This show is so frustrating because there's
It
times
yeah, yeah, this
where it's great. And then there's so many times where it just frustrates you to no end.
well, it's also just the things that they say and what and the actions they take are not don't make sense. Like the whole Halbrand coming back to Eregion. And this goes back to episode one where they're saying where his I can't remember her name, but is it Miranda? It's not Miranda, but it's something like that. Celebrimbor's assistant, basically, like, oh, there's a messenger here.
She might as well be nameless.
Yeah, well, she has a name, at least in the closed captioning. But that's the other thing that gets me is like they don't introduce people. Like people don't share their names, the side characters. So like, why name them at all? Anyway, but it's like they were told under no uncertain terms to not treat with Halbrand. And then what do?
Treat with
Event
Halbrand.
they treat with Halbrand, and it's like they're like, oh, we're not going to let you in. Well, you've already let him in. He's inside the gates. Like if you actually weren't going to treat with him, he wouldn't be let in. And then as soon as he refused to leave, the armed guards would escort him off the premises. Like this isn't a protest. Like you can't do a sit in front of freaking Celebrimbor's workshop in order to like get an audience. Go
Mm-hmm.
away. So that was the only thing that got me a little bit was it just doesn't if either don't make it so obvious that he's just already ignoring the instructions that they received. And then I thought the wine thing was kind of funny, like the callback to the first stage, but it's just like you keep your wine in the workshop. Like, aren't there massive temperature fluctuations in that workshop? Like, doesn't that
I mean, well,
potentially? I know
that's
that was
modern shit.
no, but I know, but that's just the thing. It's like that would be a great reason for him to like leave. You could see the excitement that Celebrimbor like shows when he's in private. He gets this bottle of wine, then he comes back and the guy's gone. And then yeah,
Well,
I
to
mean,
me, it makes it creepier that he goes to the cabinet and turns around and he's gone.
okay,
Then
yeah,
it's more
that
like
yes,
magical. Yeah.
yes, that was and that was effective, I thought. I will say one thing. They should have gone out of their way to show that the forge takes a long time to heat up so that when it instantly burst into flame, it underscored that the magical nature of this whole thing. Instead, they just show that the forge turns on with the flick of a switch. Like I mentioned to Haley, it's like, oh, I guess they have natural gas in Eregion. Like that just popped up. It got really hot really fast, non-magically. And now, like, you've got a fucking magic fire because it's Sauron. Anyway, I
What else from this episode?
the earthquake thing, man, it's just so poorly set up. You explained it to me before
Yeah,
we
I
started
disagree with
recording.
you. I thought it was pretty obvious from the first time I watched the episode. They cut to a map. Well, first they start the episode with Mount Doom erupting. And then as they slowly pan back, they switch to a map of Middle Earth. And then you see like black tendrils emanating out from Mount Doom. And then one goes to Khazad-dûm. And then that immediately leads into the dwarves on a market on a bridge. And Disa, because she can whisper to the mountain, apparently feels an earthquake coming and then lets everybody know to cover their heads. But you didn't like it. You didn't think it was
No,
clear enough.
it wasn't clear. It was like I didn't know. First of all, the whole type of like that's it. That's a very, very literal use of the map. In previous map uses, I'm thinking of the Lord of the Rings movies, the map is if a shadow falls on the map or the map burns or it's otherwise it's there's a figurative demonstration of spreading evil or spreading influence, and then you cut into something like the War of the Last Alliance to demonstrate the things that are happening on the map. The map is not used to literally demonstrate the spreading of a natural or unnatural phenomenon across the face of the continent. So it also like it's so that wasn't I thought that was a new use of the map. And I have to say there's probably other better ways to demonstrate the aftershock that we're seeing from the eruption. Also, by the way, how fucking long has it been since the eruption? We still don't know. Like, is this the first time there's been an aftershock and it's coming days or weeks or months later? Like, seemingly a lot has happened in Mordor when it comes to the rounding up of people, and Halbrand's obviously crossed the continent. Halbrand knows that the issues the orcs are having or the dwarves are having, like he mentions that in his conversation with Celebrimbor. How does he know that? Right? Like that wasn't clear to me. That how did Halbrand know that that an earthquake hit Khazad-dûm?
Because he's Sauron.
Right. So that's my thing. It's like, oh, he's causing the earthquake because he's Sauron and he wants to give the dwarves a reason to be
I don't,
desperate and
I
be
don't,
vulnerable.
I'm letting you rant, but
Right.
I
Okay.
just disagree with you.
No, that's fine. That's
But
fine.
I think to me, like, because he's Sauron and he has well, I don't think he's specifically causing that earthquake.
Yeah.
It's Mount Doom. But because he's basically a god, he has like a feel of what's happening. And I think he just intrinsically knows.
Right, but we never see him recognizing the earthquake and understanding what it is, and we also never see him cause it. And so when he references something that we the audience have seen, that prior to that point we have not seen the character of Sauron acknowledge or have any knowledge of, I filled in that gap by saying, "Oh, he did that off screen and it will be revealed later." Not, oh, he was aware of the earthquake or the aftershock from Mount Doom that we didn't see him experience, we didn't see him observe, that only affected the dwarves, and nobody in Eregion experienced the aftershock as far as we know. And like Eregion and Khazad-dûm are relatively close together. Like that was kind of the whole reason Eregion was built where it was. And so there was just there it was not established at all that this earthquake was common knowledge outside of Khazad-dûm, even to entities of significant power who did not have a direct hand in it. And I also thought for a second it could have been the Balrog. Like this was an early indication that the Balrog is stirring in like the depths of Khazad-dûm, which I thought would have also been interesting. So I just had I had a bunch of issues with how that was executed. And in my mind, if you wanted to show that it was Mount Doom, there are people who are closer to Mount Doom who you could have started the episode with, and they could have been observing the continuing eruption. Like you could have had Adar observing just briefly observing the continuing eruption of Mount Doom, or you could have had Nori and the Stranger and Poppy, who are in Rune, not too far away from Mount Doom, also experiencing the aftershocks. Like there could have been this like continuity between these various plot points, all tying back to the aftershocks from Mount Doom. But instead, it's shown to us visually, and then we see the one manifestation of it, and then a character references it kind of in a non sequitur. So those are my issues with the earthquake.
I thought it was a well done shot, and it made complete sense to me as I watched it. Anything else from this episode?
Was there anything else worth mentioning? Oh, what did you think of the scene with Círdan and Elrond? When Círdan's like puts his hand in the water and he's like kind of musing about the power of the ring. What did you think about that?
I'm a simp for Círdan. I think he's great.
I think his portrayal is pretty cool. I think the actor
Yeah.
does a good job.
And I liked the whole concept of Elrond still being hesitant,
Hmm.
but then Círdan playing into that. Even if you do think that the rings are for evil, wouldn't it make more sense to guide them in their
Hmm.
use instead of leaving them to this evil that you think it is? So
Hmm.
I don't know, I thought his overture to Elrond made sense.
Yeah.
And I think when we're talking about wise characters that I think are portrayed terribly, Galadriel and Gilgalad are at the top of my list.
Yeah.
And I
Okay.
think Círdan and Elrond are more faithful to the books, personally.
Hmm. I think, as we talked about in our coverage of episode one, I think they could have done more with Círdan to establish him, in referencing the, intervention of Ulmo or references to his prior experience with the shadow of evil, but it was fine. But there was one line, and now I am regretting not rewatching prior to this recording, and I'm going to go back and watch it. But I think there was a little bit of him commenting on the appreciation for craftsmanship. Do you remember this part of their conversation at all?
Not verbatim.
No. Did you did you, and maybe now in retrospect, do you think there might have been a little bit of like meta commentary there from the showrunners of like stop criticizing?
I mean, personally, no.
No?
I don't think
Okay.
they're smart enough to do that.
No, well, I don't think they're smart enough to do it well, which is why I need to go back and see if it's a little bit more blatant. And I was just maybe slightly distracted because it was, to be quite frank, part of like the boring part of their conversation. But it reminded me a little bit of, do you remember in the late seasons of Game of Thrones when Arya's in Bravos and she goes to that play, and she's supposed to assassinate the lead actress and she ends up not assassinating her, uh, which comes in
Dude,
handy when
I've
Arya.
I've blacked out so many Game of
Oh yeah, I
Thrones.
I mean, why would you, but you remember Arya getting stabbed in the stomach multiple times and then falling into a disease-ridden canal in a disgusting medieval city and then walking away with no infection and recovering after like a day to then parkour through that same city and then fight an assassin. You remember all that stuff?
No.
Oh, well, you're lucky. Would you take a roofie after watching that episode or something?
No, I originally, I mean, I wasn't a huge Game of Thrones fanatic. And then
Yeah,
on top of that, that's when the show started to suck. So, of
it did.
course,
Well, I said all that to bring up the fact that there is a character played by the wonderful Richard, is it Richard Grant, who played General Pride or Admiral Pride in Rise of Skywalker. He's been in a ton of stuff.
I remember Richard Grant from the Loki.
Yes, yes, yes,
Yeah,
Richard. Yeah,
he plays classic Loki.
yes. So Richard Grant plays an actor slash playwright who's kind of the head of this acting troupe, and he kind of goes off on a tirade against one of the actresses for suggesting other lines, and a lot of people interpret that as D&D, DB Weiss and David Benioff criticizing people who try to give them who are criticizing the critics, people who are pointing the flaws or the shortcomings in the writing of Game of Thrones, and they just give that character a mouthpiece and basically tell the critics to shut up. So I will have to go back and see if maybe if that is likely what Círdan's lines are about, or if I'm just interpolating where I shouldn't be.
We'll never know, I think.
We might. I saw if we can switch maybe over to just the overall reception and interest in Rings of Power. Have you seen any of the stats about season two viewership?
I saw season two viewership kind of dropped by half.
Yeah, and drop by half, and I think that's even worse when you consider that the season one debuted with the first two episodes, so they were like more minutes, or excuse, there were fewer minutes, and now there's more content, and even fewer people have consumed it. So it's not good. And the one article that I read, which maybe was, I don't think it was Entertainment Weekly. I don't think it was anything that like insidery, but they're basically saying like Amazon committed to 5 seasons, and if this continues, we will probably not go past season three because the show is just way too expensive to justify an audience dropping in half.
Well, I'm excited to talk about episode 4.
Okay, well, I'll have to do some catching up this week then, so that we can do that. And then maybe we'll put out a couple more episodes. But to be quite frank, people, my life is really busy. My daughter is exhausting, and my work is blowing up. So, as much as I enjoy these, doing 2 recordings in a week is tough. So, thank you for bearing with us as we slowly work through season 2, the Rings of Power. Sean, anything else before we sign off?
You can follow us on Facebook, Elves, Rings, and Nerdy Things. We have a Facebook group, Elves, Nerdy Rings, Nerdy Things Podcast. You can send us emails at elvesringsnerdythings@gmail.com. And we will be back next week covering episode 3 of Rings of Power.
All right, everybody. Until then, peace.